Mike, you're living in Italy mainly, and Italy has been one of the countries which is now quoted for having had a very populist government. Now it seems over for a time. How do you compare what has happened in Italy to what has happened in the UK and the US? Are there common grounds on all these developments? Brexit, Trump, Salvini?
I think so. I mean, I think, that there's two things going on. One, and this varies from country to country, but there are real problems in the economic trajectory that adversely affect significant subsets of the population. Sometimes that's the lower income part, sometimes that's the younger people who don't have job opportunities, sometimes that's the kind of industrial sector where jobs were adversely affected by globalization in the past, and so on. So I think that those trends, which have been going on for some time, Thomas, combined with, for the most part, and there are exceptions to this, the absence of very effective responses in terms of policy or the way, it's not just policy, it's business policy, etc., respond to that, have created a kind of skepticism. Skepticism about governance, skepticism about rich people, skepticism about experts, skepticism about the established political parties. And those forces, I think, are broadly visible, in varying forms, in the developed world. Now, the manifestation of it, whether you actually have a populist government, so in the United States, I don't know, Trump is surely an anti-establishment figure. I'm not sure the word populism is the right term, maybe it is. But Brexit looks to me to be in part a response to this. There's another dimension to it, which it's becoming pretty clear that people aren't comfortable thinking of themselves as citizens of very big units like the global economy. That just aren't. And so they are responding to the sort of the anonymity that goes with it being, plunked down in big units by wanting the units to become smaller again. And so that gives rise to localism, nationalism, rejection of some of the multinational structures that we have put in place and maybe didn't think carefully enough about the impact it would have on people and how they would react. So this is very much in a state of flux, but I think these forces they're not confined to individual countries.
Do you think there's a way to take this into account, this feeling of people that maybe human beings aren't made to be part of a global community? So is there another way, a more sensible way to take that into account instead of becoming nationalist or xenophobic or whatever? Should economists think about this, how to bring that back?
Oh, definitely. I would say that, a kind of sort of full, if you think of globalism or the global economy or globalization as characterized by these four flows that people talk about, goods and services, that's trade, financial flows, flows of people, and flows of knowledge, information, digital things nowadays. All of those flows are, if the proposal is that all of those flows should be completely, more or less completely uninterrupted, an open system, I think there are legitimate questions being asked about any of those propositions. So it seems to me the big challenge is to sort of rebuild multilateralism in a way that people can feel comfortable with, and it is very likely, once rebuilt, and we're not very far along this road, to be not to be a multilateralism that's sort of, whose ultimate goal is to make everything open. I don't think that's going to work. Let me give you an example. The internet used to be a pretty open global system. It's now being regulated everywhere. The process of regulation is differentially advanced as you go, from Europe to America to China to India. But there's two things clear. One is regulation's coming, because we way underestimated the potential risks and other things associated with lack of regulation, both economic and social, especially social and political. And secondly, those regulations are going to be promulgated in the case of Europe at the European level, and in the case of other countries, especially major ones at the country level. And because those countries have different priorities and values and governance structures, they're not going to be the same. So the internet, looking forward, even if one can't bring it entirely into focus, is going to be a partially fragmented structure. And that doesn't mean it's closed in the sense there's one internet here and one internet here, but it means it won't be the open one that everybody thought we would have, say, 15 years ago. And that's just one area. I think that's going to happen in multiple areas as you go through those flows. Immigration, movement of people. I think it will happen in the financial area as well. It's not obvious for a wide range of countries that a totally open capital account with money sloshing in and out, frequently in response to imbalances or something that are a long distance away, is the optimal policy for smaller countries whose financial systems can't stand the volatility.
Mm. We've been running a survey among Germans who said at 80% that they would wish in this globalized world that their national government should have more responsibilities again. That seems to support what you're saying. It seems just that, I mean, there are so many things that are not under control anymore, or very difficult to control, as in financial flows or so. You're quoting some examples, but in very general terms, what does it need to get back to an understanding which would make it distinguish between what should be open or what should be more regulated? Is there something that an economist can help to decide?
I think this is a work in process. So what I expect will happen is that the forces, let's call them localism, right? Where people feel comfortable, where their governments are more powerful vis-a-vis, their citizens' lives than they maybe are when big powerful forces are operating in an open global economy. I think we'll go too far in that direction, and then people will start to understand that there are real costs to shutting down some of these channels too much. And then we'll move back, and we will search for basically beneficial, structures where there's a kind of balance between local control on the one hand and the benefits of what we used to call the benefits of trade. But, for example, academics like me live in a world that's sort of the upstream part of a process that generates ideas that turn into policy, or for engineers into technology, and for biomedical sciences into medicines and other innovations. And in that sort of upper part, we have what is essentially a very open global system. We don't have proprietary information for the most part, unless it intersects a national security agenda. Those flows are viewed as open, no charges for them, and for the most part, knowledge is viewed as a global public good. And there are enormous benefits from that, right? So if you have an advance in sort of biomedical science in Europe, you don't want a bunch of people in the United States and China trying to do it when it's already been done, right? What you want them to do is understand it and build on it and make their contribution to this edifice that underpins science, technology, and knowledge progress in our world. So we may interfere a little bit with that, but if we go too far, people will start to understand that we've really done some damage, and then we'll pull back. I don't think so far we've done serious damage to that. These are very long-run things, you know. When the structure of DNA was discovered, everybody thought it was scientifically interesting, but I don't think anybody really completely understood what it was going to do in terms of, you know, biomedical science, medicine, healthcare, and not to mention archaeology, our understanding of the planet, and a whole bunch of other things that, you know, it's just too hard to see that far forward. But the general principle is that that part of the world, it needs to be open because it's, A, so important, B, from an economist's point of view, knowledge has this extraordinary characteristic that if person A has it and transmits it to person B, they both have it. So it's not a zero-sum game. Or another way to say it is the marginal cost of moving it from one place to the other is relatively small compared to the cost of creating it. So this whole system has evolved in a way that's pretty efficient, and I don't think we want to close that down.
You earlier said that maybe we don't yet know if we are already on the way to a new paradigm. Just as a simple question, easy question, what would you think in 5 years or 10 years? Will we stand there and say, well, that has been a process and we're now having something like a new paradigm which helps to make the world be a better place?
Well, one can hope for that, you know, but I think both at the level of, you know, call it social science disciplines and related policy discussion, but on the sort of academic side, that's one dimension, and another dimension is how's the world behaving, right? Which is the practitioners. And on both fronts, I think you can imagine a scenario in which there's more or less not even but steady progress, and that's the hoped for outcome. We understand it better and we're acting on it better. Another one is that we stay gridlocked into patterns that come from the past as the tensions and political and social fragmentation and other things rise and get to a boiling point. And you know, I guess I'm not terribly pessimistic that that's the path we'll take, but realistically, I think we have to admit it's a possibility.
Last question. If there was one thing that you would have in mind that you would say, this is the biggest, the most important issue that we should concentrate on also on our mission, on our forum, what would that be?
If I had to pick one, that's very difficult, you know, and because, you know, there's a lot of contenders, I guess. If I had to pick two, it would be in the sustainability, climate change, and adapting to the digital economy. And if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick the environmental sustainability.
Thanks a lot, Mike, and we're happy to have you as one of our intellectual supporters and INET in general, and we're very much looking forward to cooperate again in the future. Thank you.
I'm glad you're launching this endeavor, and I'm sure it will make a huge contribution to improving on the trends we just talked about.